When a thread snaps, you might be able to join it back together. However, it will not be the same smoothness again. There will always be a knot. Hi there, this is Gaurav Gupta, your life and business success strategist. Welcome to the Daily Snippets. Today's video has been made on special request by few of my viewers who are struggling in their relationships. So if you want to be on top of your relationships, especially in these times, do watch this video till the end. Once upon a time, there were two neighbors, Mr. Happy and Mr. Sad. They used to stay in a condominium and their balconies faced each other so that they could see what's happening in each other's life. Mr. Sad and his wife were always fighting. They were fighting even at the drop of a hat. Mr. Happy and his wife were always in love, cuddling each other, complimenting each other, hugging each other, kissing each other. Totally contrasting lives. One fine day, Mr. Sad and his wife, they had such a bad fight that they both started crying. And at that moment, Mr. Sad realized that there's Mr. Happy who stays next door. Why can't I go there, ask him the secret to how he's able to have such a beautiful relationship with his wife? So Mr. Sad took the courage and went to the Happy family. As he rang the bell, Mr. Happy opened the door. He welcomed Mr. Sad inside. Both of them sat. And that's when he asked him, Mr. Sad, would you like to have a cup of tea? He said, yes, of course, I don't mind. So Mr. Happy called Mrs. Happy. Mrs. Happy, Mr. Sad is at home. Do you mind giving us some tea? Mrs. Happy prepared the tea. She served the tea. As both of them sipped the tea, their expressions changed. Mr. Sad was, is this tea? And Mr. Happy was, wow, this is a wonderful tea. So Mr. Happy actually complimented Miss Happy. Thank you so much, darling. It's one of the best teas I've ever had. Mr. Sad asked Mr. Happy, Mr. Happy, the tea is actually tasting salty rather than sweet, and you're complimenting your wife? He said, yes, I understand the tea is salty. However, it's not her fault. She could have just mixed up the salt and sugar powder which is sitting next to each other. Let's correct it right now. So he called Mrs. Happy. He said, Mrs. Happy, why don't you also come and have tea with us? So Mrs. Happy came, she sipped the tea with them. And she said, oh my God, this tea is salty. Oh no, I once again mixed up the salt and sugar. Let me correct it for you. She went inside and brought fresh tea for both of them. Mr. Sad was amazed by this entire event and he asked Mr. Happy, Mr. Happy, how come you guys are so calm, so understanding and so cool with each other? Were you always like this? That's when Mr. Happy shared with him my incidents and gave him a new perspective, which, my friends, would change your perspectives as well. Mr. Happy said, no, Mr. Sad, we were not always like this. We always used to fight. We would fight on a drop of a hat. But one incident happened which changed everything for us. Would you like to hear about it? He said, yes, of course. So Mr. Happy said, one day me and my wife, we were standing in the kitchen and she was preparing sandwiches. She was cutting the edges of the bread or the crumbs and she kept them aside. I was very happy. I said, wow, for the first time, darling, you're keeping the crumbs, preserving them so that we can offer them to the birds. She said, I do not think I was doing that, but anyways, if you want it, I can keep it. Later, when she was cleaning up the kitchen, she accidentally happened to throw the crumbs. And that's when I became mad at her. I started arguing, then that argument turned into shouting, and we both called each other names, and it was a full-blown fight. And that's when my daughter came rushing in. She looked at both of us, she understood what's happening, and she asked us one question, which made us think, and it changed everything for us. She said, what? You guys are fighting for breadcrumbs? And that was a moment, Mr. Happy said, I realized that no, it was not the breadcrumbs. Me and my wife, we do not care a hoot about breadcrumbs. It was more than that. It was about values. It was about egos. It was about who's right and who's wrong. It was all that pent up emotions. We do not care for crumbs, but there were other things which were killing it all. It was just our ego which was actually killing our relationship. And he said that moment, that day onwards, we decided that we'll never ever fight again because we understood. It's easy to break a thread, but when you join it back, there will always be a knot. So we committed that we'll never ever fight again. And that day onwards, we did not fight. Mr. Sad learnt a very profound lesson that day. And then onwards, his relationships were always perfectly smooth with not just his spouse, everybody. So my friends, if you want to strengthen your relationships and have very strong relationships, especially with your spouses, here are a few things you should understand from this story. Number one, other people are also humans. They have the right to their actions, their thoughts, their feelings, their words. Be very, very tolerant, accept it and live with it. Number two, be emotionally self-aware. What are your trigger points? What are other people's trigger points? Avoid those trigger points and your relationships will be very, very smooth. Always choose to respond rather than react. It's when we react that we actually kill everything for ourselves. Number four, never argue. Because when you're arguing, it's all about who is right rather what is right. In the story, nobody cared about breadcrumbs. What they were actually looking for is their egos. Who's right? I am right. No, I am right. I am right. No, I am right. And lastly, remember, cherish each and every relationship. Because once the relationship breaks, it will never be the same again. You might be able to mend it, but there will always be a knot. So stay blessed, keep rocking, have wonderful relationships with your family, have a great time. I'll see you soon in my next video. Thank you.